Hello, guys. How is everybody today? Oh, well, I just turned this thing on and, I had done some preliminary things before I turned this thing on. I did drum up some pictures for the background to run behind me as I'm talking, and I think you'll like these pictures. I think this will really help as I tell this story today because we've been talking about a lot of different things from, well, basically the biblical history. But what we're finding out is that the Bible is not just about some little country in the Middle East. Oh, it's about everybody, all the nations and all the teachings, all the esoteric wisdom of every nation, because all the nations are the 12 tribes. Now, there's a lot I'm going to say today that I probably won't spend a long time trying to give details. We're not going to put corroborations for a lot of the things I'm saying. I'm just going to tell it in a story form without really backing a lot of the things I'm saying, because I think we backed most of what we've been saying up over the last few years. We've been doing these videos, and we've got a lot of evidence we piled up, and a lot of you are watching, and you've been watching. But I wanted to make a video today because I wanted to clear up a few things about, well, Scandinavian countries and British people and even German people. Yeah, those darn Germans. We keep talking about these Bavarians, and I think I've given a little bit of the wrong impression on a couple of things that I wanted to clear up today, and at the same time tell you the whole story from beginning to end. Who are these people in Europe? Who are these white people? I know a lot of you are a little suspicious. I remember growing up, my dad, my uncle, they had gotten a hold of a book that traced my name, Vos, my my father's name, traced it back quite a ways. And I remember they were just so interested, and they were like, oh, I was all excited. Oh, I guess we were from Germany. Like somehow or another, I remember them talking about Vos being a German name. So that's what I believed, for years. But when I got older and I started doing some research, I found out that the word German doesn't really mean anything. Well, I mean, it's a word, but they're supposed to be these Germanic tribes. And we've talked about them. They're Lombards, there's Herlu, the Goths and the Ostrogoths and the Visigoths and different tribes. Now, there may be some variables, but most of these tribes, I guess, are white. And you see a lot of these stories today, New Age. Interesting how they're supposed to be about love and New Age and together and they're non-racist, right? Because they're New Age and love, and yet they're basically teaching the Nazi doctrine of this supremacy, this white. Yeah, I mean, they talk about the white brotherhood, but then when you press them on it, they're like, oh no, that doesn't really mean white people. It just means they're glorious, clean white people. What does that mean? White. They're glorious. They're not. Has nothing to do with skin color. It's about the white brotherhood. What does that mean? And they start scrambling. Well, it doesn't mean their skin color, but it means something like they're righteous. Well, if you look at their pictures, they always seem to be white people. And you have to understand that most of this New Age stuff didn't come. You could say it came from Madame Blavatsky, but she was a true prophet. But she didn't teach any kind of white supremacy. She went to India and was teaching and learned from them, as all the ancient peoples did when they wanted to know anything. They went to India or somewhere, maybe a darker skinned race of people that still had these mysteries. But Madame Blavatsky talked about the Aryan race, but it had nothing to do with. But it actually had nothing to do with race as we understand race today. We talk about race today. we're just talking about people that are on the earth today, skin color. Well, race isn't always just skin color. What she was talking about is ages of mankind, developments, advancements in human beings from millions of years in the past. And the Aryan race is basically every race on the face of the earth today, but this generation, you might say, or this advancement of human beings, like there was the Atlantean race. Well, that was hundreds of thousands of years ago. So Aryan really has its root in that word Orion, right? Orion or Osiris, and we're all the children of this Osiris, who is born on the horizon. His son Horus, he's reborn in his sun, and the sun rises, and we're going into the new age. And they've got everything all backwards. They're talking about racism we're not supposed to be talking about. Love and truth is a unity of all peoples. And the Bible says that every nation on the face of the earth came from one man, that is Adam. So there's lots of lies. So we shouldn't characterize the Aryan race as having any particular skin color. Madame Blavatsky said they're all the way from dark brown, black, all the way up to white. It's everybody. And it's just all the human beings today. This idea of race is ridiculous. It's a modern concept that got started from these lies, Crowley and these NAZIs over there, that's what New Ageism is. That's why it's so popular and they promoted it. The people who are promoting New Ageism isn't Madame Blavatsky. It may have started about that time, and partly due to her teachings. But the New Age movement is really a distortion of the truth. Because she exposed all this. She opened up these ancient esoteric books and explained and put it together and synchronized a lot of it. Well, in order to confuse the world, because she had opened up this truth, they had to do something. They had to scramble. They put a curse on her, and she had to go to India. The Germanic Illuminati tried to kill her, and they ended up killing her. But while she was sort of in India hiding out because they were trying to kill her, they started raising up these individuals like Steiner and other individuals that really basically, some individuals who took over Theosophy, and then Steiner who made up a whole new thing. And so many people are saying that Steiner is good and he likes Blavatsky. No, he didn't agree with Blavatsky, and he said that she did wrong and she had no business, and that he was trying to justify why they put the curse on her. And no, Steiner's not so great, and all these things that he basically taught may sound interesting and beautiful, and some of it may be true, because the devil's got to always have a lot of truth. But there's just a lot of lies coming from every direction. So the New Age is a movement to confuse. The New Age movement, just like today Christianity. Well, we follow Jesus, yes we do. And I like Madame Blavatsky, yes I do. But I'm not a modern New Ager, because it doesn't have the true teachings. It has bits and pieces of it. Just as today we have Protestants. Well, they believe in the Bible, or Christians. They believe in Jesus, but it's another Jesus. And I'm not going to call myself, well, originally they were called Christians. But now what a Christian is today is something entirely different. Somebody goes to some club, right? Somebody who's doing a bunch of rituals that they don't understand. People who have become apostate. The truth is not in the world, has been eradicated. We're in the apostasy. So there isn't any organization like New Age. There ain't no Moonies that know the truth, or Jehovah's Witnesses, or Mormons, or anybody. There were those like Joseph Smith and Blavatsky and Gandhi and people who came along who helped the world and taught the world. But they didn't start an institution. They were persecuted and killed and so forth. But I say that because we have to understand that I know a lot of people are watching my videos and trying to find evidence that the real true Jerusalem is somewhere in their country. Oh, it's in Africa, right? And we're the real Israelites, all the black people. Well, look, I sympathize with you. And in some sense, it's kind of true. Native peoples are Israel, right? They're the lost Israel. All the nations are lost Israel. But it's not just black people, it's Chinese people. East, west, north, and south, they were scattered. Even in the land of Sinim, which is down around Indonesia and China. So the Bible says. And it says they'll come from the north, the south, the west. They've been scattered and planted, actually, as we said the other day. And so Joseph is the one who gets the blessing, and he had a coat of many colors. And in the end, he's going to, be blessed and with a multitude. That's his blessing, and that's all nations, tribes, tongues, and peoples. So I've been saying a lot of things kind of derogatory about Bavarians, and I think some of you are getting the wrong idea and thinking that just all white people then are the bad guy. We've been talking about the tribe of Dan. Well, that's just one tribe. So all of the Germans aren't of the tribe of Dan. There is a group of people that live up around Bavaria. They live up around Khazaria, some people call it. That is a theory that someone posted some years ago, that there was an ancient nation called Khazaria, which is up kind of around that area too. And that's where maybe they originally started. Well, there is some evidence in history that there was a group of people that all converted to Judaism. And so it gets very convoluted. People haven't been able to understand what's really going on. But what I want to do today is define, I want to make a bit of a correction as well. We've been talking about the Tuatha De Danans. And I had said, if you go back several videos, I had said we were really talking about how Israel had these two sons born from Judah. And Judah has the scepter until he who comes as legal right. So Judah has the scepter for now and rules the world, the royal bloodline. Well, there were two sons born of Judah. One was Perez and one was Zerah. And we talked, I'm not going to go deeply into all this prophecy, but we got to basically mention it. So to fully understand a lot of the stuff I'm going to say, you're going to have to go back and watch a lot of different videos, because it's going to be so packed full of information. I can't go in depth on any one piece of this information. So most of you, I think a lot of you have followed me for a while, and you kind of have an idea of what I'm saying. So Zerah was a line that went up to Rome, made the royal bloodlines of Rome, Caesar. It went to the Greeks, to Troy. We talked about how it went all the way up to Ireland, which today we call the Tuatha De Danann. So it's confusing, and I said in that video that some people believe that the Tuatha De Danann is the tribe of Dan, and some of them believe that it is the tribe of Danus. Danus was a child of Judah, or a child of Zerah from Judah. So, and there was a period of time when I wasn't really quite certain. I always kind of leaned toward the Tuatha De Danann being from Judah. And there's so much is going through my mind right now that I want to say, but I gotta put that on hold. We gotta take this one step at a time. So, Elena Danan says she's from this tribe. Well, I was saying she's basically saying maybe she's saying she's from the tribe of Dan, but she might. I don't know whether she knows what she's talking about, or if she really is the emissary of Yahweh. Maybe they have put fairly accurate information in her cue cards when she talks. I don't know. But I don't know that she personally knows any of this. If she went to some university, I doubt whether they taught her any of this. But, a lot of people want to believe that this Tuatha De Danann is some, amazing, ancient lineage that people want to be a part of. So I can see why she wants to be of that lineage. Whether she knows or has any proof that she is a child of somebody who was in that lineage, I don't know. But yes, the Tuatha De Danann, I think we can give some evidence today that shows that it has to be the tribe of Danus from Judah and not the tribe of Dan. We know that because the Tuatha De Danann up in Ireland really were the Celts. And the Celts they're not the ones worshiping Dan or Odan, right, or Woden, or that I was telling you was the Goths. The Goths are different from the Celts. So, it's hard to keep in mind all these little factors as you're talking sometimes, but I've leaned for a long time, and I've now come to the place where I really truly believe that I'm just about 100% sure that the Tuatha De Danann is from Judah. And that's a good side. And they're the Celts, and they believe in... So they're the ones with the priesthood we call the Druids. Now, someone pointed out the other day that I had said that the Druids were the bad priesthood from Dan. And I don't know why I said that. I was mistaken. The Druids are the good people. They're the good priesthood. The Druids were the Celts. The Celtic peoples had Druids. The word Druid is actually, it's come down to us in English as truth or true. Even the word tree comes from it. You can look this up, the etymology, but there are two words we have in English that I know of that directly go back to the word Druid. One is tree, and the other is truth. So Drut really is the root for truth. Now they say it means a seer, but it may also mean a knower, not just a seer, because remember the tree of the knowledge. So all the esoteric wisdom in every nation is going to be based in the same symbolisms and the same facts. So this knowledge was always in the ancient language represented in the hieroglyphs and in the pictographs as a tree. So when you saw a tree, sometimes that tree could mean, like an oak tree, could mean strength or mighty, but it primarily meant branches of information. You eat from the tree, and it had to do... See, because it starts off with the stability in the ground, consciousness, and a mountain being higher consciousness. And growing up out of the ground is knowledge, but smaller things can be like the leaves or the grass that grows and then it withers and well, that's just not truth. Okay, truth is something firm like a tree that doesn't move as much. That's why Jesus said that the tree could be withered from its roots, and you had to uproot it and throw it into the sea. It could be done with faith, because false knowledge gets a hold in you with roots. And so there was all this symbolism, but yeah, trees really represent truth. And so our word truth comes from the word tree, and also ultimately from the earth, because earth is also a similar word. Eretz, many languages, the stability is even before truth. You've got the stability of facts, absolute truth. The tree then would maybe more be knowledge. So one who was a knower is one who had eaten from the tree and had been initiated. Now, that is what, to the best of my ability, the word druid means. It means a high priest. And I want you to understand that the Celts were there a long time ago, way before the Goths got there. And when did the Celts get there? Well, we could trace all of these migrations and stuff back to the children of Israel that went into captivity in 720. So around that time, even before. So in 720, there's a big wave of migration. The Scythians, and they went over and ended up into the Iberian Peninsula, which is Hebrew, Iberian. And, it's known that whole area was Sephardic peoples, we'll call it. And there were others, Ashkenazi ones, that were up in a different area that we were talking about just a minute ago that we call the Bavarians today. But since everybody is of the tribe of Israel, everybody's Israel, but there were two waves of people. There was the Judeans that went down into Babylon and came back out, and then they were scattered in the days of Jesus, when he said not one stone to be left upon a stone. So they went into captivity. But Israel didn't go into captivity, as we said when we were reading the book of Hosea. They literally were set free. Okay, Hosea, which is another word for Jesus, which, by the way, Isaiah is also another name for Jesus. It means salvation. And when we get to the book of Isaiah, it's going to be amazing, guys, because there's probably 2 or 3 different books of Isaiah, as we'll find out. And there may be differences of opinions in some of those particular writings. We'll get into that. But Hosea says that they're not just scattered Israel, the 10 tribes, but they're planted. They're literally guided by the Lord, and he's going to bless them in the end. They're going to come out a multitude, the blessings of Joseph. So they went into the world, and they went to China, they went to Russia, they went to Africa, they went everywhere. But the reason why there's so much happening up around this area in Europe isn't because of the Celts or a lot of white people. They didn't have any power. They didn't have any, they were running around, they didn't have suit and tie. They were Israelites, and they had a lot of the same teachings, the mystery teachings. They worshiped many deities, not just one like the Judeans did. And they had, today we call them witches. That's why the Catholic Church hated them and tried to stamp out all the witches or the wizards. These were Celt, druid priests, knowers, seers, wise people. That's what wizard means. Well, you see, the Catholic Church, they started doing inquisitions once they had been taken over by the Goths. And we'll explain who the Goths are. They're kind of mixed up with the Vikings, and they're the ones who worship Odin, right? Lombards had this Woden or Godin. They called him Godin, and they changed it to God. So I had a comment in yesterday's video, and I appreciate that comment very much. And you were correct. And there was another person that chimed in and said, I didn't understand what Dave was saying, because I don't think the Druids were bad. Well, they're not. Okay, I misspoke. So the priesthood of the Goths is this thing that today we have the days of the week, Wednesday, Thursday, Freya Day, and all this stuff. This didn't come from the Celts. It came from the Goths and the Vikings, Scandinavian countries. And both the Goths and the Vikings, their headquarters, they came from virtually the same exact location up in Sweden. And they're basically the same thing. Although Vikings was more of a type of, it was the people that went off on ships. So in a sense, that's more like what Dan did when he got on the ships from Sedan and went to London. Okay, that don't mean that the Celts made London. It means that Dan, probably way even before Israel was scattered, 720, even before that, 900,000, 1100 BC, Dan had already gone up there on the ships. And so there were already people, years before the scattering of Israel, there was this tribe of Zerah from Judah that had gone up into Greece and Troy and went to Ireland. So they were up there before the scattering of Israel. The other migration that you see in the world where people went and began to colonize stuff, this came from the 10 tribes being scattered in 720. But there were other tribes that were scattered and went different places before 720. One group that went from Egypt. We've got books and histories. And in Ireland, they have a whole book of their history. They talk about the prophet Jeremiah bringing a Tifi from Egypt, who was a princess from Egypt. Who was that? Well, that's the tribe of the Israelites, the tribe of Joseph. Remember, the tribes were down there. They were enslaved. So before Moses led them out, there was some migration from Israelites. Then they lived in Goshen. The Israelites, when they lived for 500 years in the land of Goshen, right, in Egypt. And they were pharaohs all the way back 500 years before Moses led them out. They had been in Egypt. They weren't always slaves. Remember, when Joseph was down there originally, he was the pharaoh, right, in the northern Egyptian kingdom. There was a southern and a northern. So by the time of Moses, between Joseph and Moses, there were other migrations. We don't know that because there's books that tell us that. Okay, the chronologies of the Irish chronologies tell us that they came from the tribe of Israel, and Jeremiah the prophet brought Teotihi and the stone of Joseph, right? The stone of Scone. So we do know that some of the royal bloodline of Judah went to Ireland and Britain. They ended up in Britain, the Celts, and Iberian Peninsula. And this is kind of where they finally ended up making their headquarters, was a place called Britain, which kind of loosely is where we get the word British. Brit means covenant, and ish in Hebrew means man. So the British means a covenant man. But the place that they went to up in Britain, which is below England, just kind of in the northeast corner of France, is a place called Britain. And they had a place that they named America. And so when they sailed from there to America, as the Pilgrims, when they got here, they named it America. Well, they came here to get away from the persecution of the Goths, who had taken over Rome, the church, who were these Ashkenazi individuals who wanted to go back to the law of Moses, and who had also joined up with the tribe of Dan. That's why many of those individuals up there, the Goths, spoke, or I should say they worshipped Odin and Thor and all of this. So that is the people of Dan, not to be confused with the Celts. They were probably the Vikings as well, because the Vikings, and as I said, the Vikings and the Goths came from the same spot. They had these boats, and they were the ones who would put this, sometimes they'd put a serpent on their sail, and sometimes a cross. And this is where we get the Red Cross, the Jesuits. Well, these were the Goths that took over the church. And so, like Constantine says, he would conquer in that sign, that symbol of the cross. Remember the Nazis, the Bavarians, they also use a type, they call it a swastika. And that was originally a cross. The Mr. Führer over there actually read Madame Blavatsky. That's how important her work was. And they knew it was true, but they wanted to pervert it. But, so they didn't want to teach us the truths of Madame Blavatsky's, which is the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita and the synchronization with the Bible and all. So they were learning all of that too. The Vril Society and all these types of societies where all this occult got started, which, originally is the Illuminati that was started by John Dee and Edward Kelly. That opened up the pits of hell and created this whole Illuminati. So the Goths were in this Satanism, which, as we've said, originally started with Dan at the Mount of Hermon, where they made the pact, which is the secret pact. But the giants, when they died, they couldn't come back to the earth and reincarnate, so they were just the Rephaim, and they began to, because they had mingled with Dan, they considered some of Dan's children their own bloodlines. And they mixed with the Judeans. Once the Judeans left and went down to Babylon, then they came down and took some of the Aaronic priests and made this whole new religion. And they conquered the world under the God of Yahweh, which was colonization and war and killing, and nothing like the Celts, who were really the lost children of Israel that had been up there from two different, waves. One from Zerah's line that had finally gone up there, and they were nature believers. They believed in the mother deity and the father and the children and all of these particular divine beings, just like the Greeks. So this is why we were talking about how Elihu went to Syria, which is up in Greece, and made the mystery schools. And so it went all over and around. But so wherever you go, you'll always find these two religions. It's also over in the East as much as it is here. You'll have the the mystery schools that teach love, the higher priesthood, and you've got these other individuals that the devil will send in no matter where you are. He'll find you and he'll, offer people power, money, whatever he can do to corrupt people, get them in the secret priesthood. And he makes his like little Illuminati or his little secret societies everywhere around the world, and they take over and infiltrate and kill. So basically the Vikings was like a military brigade. They had their ships, and they were Dan's military brigade, right? Possessed of Satan, and they began to worship Odin. And they named everything, everywhere they went, the Serpent's Trail. They went to Lundan, they went to Doniper, the Dinister. So that is the bad guys. But when they went there were already good guys there from different, like I said, from different avenues of migration. One from Egypt, from the line of Zerah. Others from the 10 lost tribes scattering and going over there. Because one group went, and we've talked about this many times, one group went to, Mary Magdalene got on a boat with the 72 that Jesus chose, and Lazarus, who became the first knight. And Joshua, my friend, was telling me the other day, he thinks maybe the word knight, when you knight someone, is basically like bestowing upon them the Holy Spirit. So it was a priesthood, and they were to protect the Holy Grail. That's what they were for. They weren't warriors. Now, yes, there are warriors in the north now because the Goth teachings and the teachings of Yahweh, and he teaches your hand for warfare, and that's crept in, and people today up there don't know whether they go back to the Celts or the Goths or who they are. They're just all Europeans. Like I said, I was told I was German, and it turns out that I could trace my lineage back to the area down in southern France, not Germany. And so the word Voss actually goes back to the German V-A-U-X, which is the Latin Valdo, which is Peter Waldo, and that's the Waldensian persecution. And Peter Waldo owned 169 towns, cities, and villages along the Rhine, and he was the reigning prince from the lineage of Mary Magdalene and Jesus that came to Marseille, France on that boat. So these individuals, the knights, they ended up going down in history. We've got King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. And the Arthenian Lore is accurate historical information, scripture, right? Written in prose, written as scripture. It was script. Okay? It's not mythology. It's telling you where the children of Israel went. And the Irish have many documents that tell you about Jeremiah and Teotihi and all of this, Arthur and Sir Lancelot and Percy Val. So Percy Val was the one who would take the sword. That's Peter Valdez or Peter Waldo, Percy Val. He was the prince. So the Waldensians were very rich because Peter Waldo, in order to not let all of his wealth, because remember, when Mary Magdalene came over in that boat, she had a lot of wealth because her mother was Cleopatra VII, who literally was the queen of the then known world back in those days, and Caesar and stuff. So they had conquered Egypt, Syria, all the Palestinian area, all the way over into Persia, Far East, up into Greece. All that belonged, all the wealth and the gold and everything belonged to those knights, that high priesthood, that Jesus was the Rex Sacrorum and the Pontifex Maximus. That, if you go into the history and look at Gaul or that Septimania area, there's a book I read years ago, and I didn't know anything about this at the time, but and like I said, I don't read books, but I remember as a young man, I came across this book at a thrift store or something, and it was called The Druids. And I remember it was about this young boy that was a Druid priest. He was a young man. He was going to become a Druid priest or something. And he made a friendship with this man, and the man has a long name, and I couldn't pronounce it then, and I can't pronounce it now. I couldn't even begin to remember how to pronounce it. I just know that the last three letters is Rex, which of course is the Rex Sacrorum. He was the king, and he was from this area down there at Septimania. But at the time, I didn't know who this was. It was something like Vincent Terragora Rex or something. But this guy, and this is a story, it's a novel, but it's based on the truth, that the true kingship was there because Mary Magdalene brought it there. And they had a relationship with the Druids. So you can go and read that book. I think it's called The Druids. I'll look it up and see if I can. I'll tell you the name of that book next time I do a video. I don't know the name right now offhand. But I remember just thumbing through it when I was a young man and was very interested in it. I don't think I read the whole thing. I think some of it at least, most of it maybe. And I just remember having these feelings as I was reading. I was like, what is this? It just seems so familiar to me. Well, it turns out my ancestors come from that area. And many of us do. And my mother's ancestors came from Ireland. Her name was McConaughey, and I've traced that back to the McConnaughts, who basically ruled Ireland and came from this Tuatha De Danann tribe. So, pretty much everybody can trace their lineage back, if you are one of the tribes of Israel, to one of the tribes of Israel. We can all do that. But it's very difficult, and I'm just fortunate enough to have found these little pieces of information so that I was able to trace. Now, I didn't trace my lineage father to son. I mean, there could have been a whole bunch of bastards in between, right? I'm just saying that my name goes back to that. And I don't think we can do much better than that, most of us. But I do know that the name Vos has, some heraldry and some legends. Now, if you have heraldry, you can go quite a ways back with your genealogy. But if you get back and you find that there is legends attributed to your name, now you can go back even further. The legend that was attached to the Vos line was that we were from one of the 3 wise men that came to greet Jesus when he was born. Well, people read that story, they really don't know what it's about. But those 3 wise men came from the east, and they were magi, or magicians. Now, the magi, who were they? Well, these 3 magi came from Persia, and that's where the prophet Daniel, that's why he was so important, and he was so wise, because he knew these mysteries. He was taught and initiated into these mysteries up and around Persia. And these are the mysteries that go back all the way to Adam. All right, they were handed down to the Zoroastrians had them, and the Egyptians had them, and so forth. So Daniel learned and became head of the magical practicing priests. There were magic practicing priests from Egypt too, which is where they originally were, the lineage of the Pharaoh. So it says in the book of Daniel that Daniel was of the tribe of Judah. So he was a royal bloodline. Well, his lineage would be from Perez, which is the line of Christ. So when the 3 wise men, or the magic practicing priests, or astrologers, came from the east, they came from Persia, and they were royal bloodlines that were giving gifts to Christ, saying, this is the Christ, we're the royal bloodline. So there was this Melchior, Caspar, and Balthasar. Well, Balthasar, Tsar is the king, Tsar, right? So supposedly the Vos line comes from Balthasar, but it does go back through the lineage of the Judeans through Perez, back to King David and all the way back. And you find this in the legends. Now, like I said, a lot of people can go back and look at their names, and if you really know what you're doing, it takes a lot of work and more inspiration than actual work, probably, because, you could search for years trying to find genealogy, and you may not find it. You got to be a good detective. But I found this information. There had been a book written that my father and my uncle had, and I got this information just sort of accidentally, and it was really interesting. But, so I'm not really German. I thought German meant somebody over in the bounds of this country called German. But it's a German tribe. Well, not really. Because since it goes back to Mary Magdalene and Jesus, that wouldn't be one of these German tribes, because the German tribes were the Goths. And they were partly from Dan and partly from Judah and some of the royal bloodline of the Nephilim. And thank goodness I'm not from that, because I'm from a different line in the south of France at Marseille. But since the Germans, or the Goths, ended up taking over that area, they took over Septimania, and once they had killed in the Inquisition all the Waldensians, Peter Waldo and his crew, Waldo had all this wealth, but he gave it to the people. They also became known as Albigensians because when they were persecuted in the valley, the Val, Percival, that's why they were called Waldo, or the Peter of the Valley. They ended up fleeing to the mountains up in the Alps, and then later on became the Albigans. Well, there was a great inquisition of the Waldensians and the Albigensians. And the reason for that inquisition is because they were trying to root out the lineage of Christ. And since Peter Waldo knew that he'd probably end up being martyred or killed, and they wanted all of his wealth, he dispersed all of his wealth to all the people of the Languedoc, which is that area down in Septimania. So this is why the Catholic Church, or the Goths, wiped them out, every man, woman, and child in the Inquisition, because they wanted to get their money, their land, and their wealth. Well, once they had done that, they no longer had a royal bloodline to rule over them, because every nation's got to have a bloodline from Judah to rule over them. This is no matter where you're at. I don't care if you're in Africa, China, Russia, wherever. They all have royal bloodlines ruling over them. And probably because they had the money, the wealth, they had knights, they had military, they had, all of this. So they could and they were guided by, the bad ones were guided by the devil. And of course, they gave them technology and advancement. But the peasants never could rise up. So Peter Waldo was very, very rich, but he didn't lord it over the people. They were translating the Holy Textus Receptus in the common language of the day that they had there, the Languedoc, and they were being good to the people and trying to build libraries and help people, and it was a wonderful, little kingdom. It was of love. So of course, Satan didn't like that, so they went down there and they killed them all and took all their money. Well, they fled then from that southern France up through Paris and all the way up to the northeastern part of France, and made a place called Amorica, which is what they called America when they got here. But they also went to British, and came the Covenant man British, or the Saxons, or Isaac's sons, or the Iberians, or the Hebrews, or, on and on and on. This is why when they came to America, they became known as the Union Jack. And there were 13 colonies, because there were 13 tribes. And so it was the union of Jacob. They came to America knowing that they were going to fulfill prophecy that was given to Jacob through his firstborn son, that would be fruitful by a well, go over the wall, and they knew that would be the Great Sea, and come to America and rebuild Zion, which was originally in America, or Atlantis, beyond the gates of Gibraltar, over the Atlantic Sea. But one of the designations we have for them is the Celts. So they had been there long before 720, when they were scattered, because they came up through Zerah's line. Then you've got another wave of migration of Israel, as I said, that came from the south of France, where Mary Magdalene brought the 72, which was the government, right? The whole Sanhedrin that Jesus chose. And Lazarus, the first knight. And they were Templars because they were building the temple with their brotherhood. Spiritual stones being built up, a spiritual house, which they planned on building the great temple. Well, they had already had plans and started. They had built one up in Scotland, and they ended up building one up in Britain. But those were just sort of preliminary. We've got Avalon, and this is the stories we have. We don't know exactly what they were like. They built Stonehenge, all of this. But when they came to America, they had planned on building the great New Jerusalem. Now, maybe they didn't know that they didn't have to do it literally. I don't know. Maybe they understood it was spiritual as well. But this was the plan. They came here to make a constitution, so the original founding fathers were good people. Okay, but right on their tail, was the people with the red cross and the serpent on the sail, the Vikings, right? The skull and bones. Now, skull and bones, we have a secret society called that. Bush and John Kerry were part of it. And this is a sister secret society to the Templi Ordi that was created by Crowley. I think he had a hand in creating both of them. Yale University, the York Rite. It's called the York Rite because it's up there around, I think, London or in that area, one of those little big towns there. And, the city of York. And then they came over here and made New York. But another sister organization to the Skull and Bones and the Templi Ordi in California, of course, is the Vril Society, made in the 1940s by Ein Führer. So, if you want to know who really runs the world at the moment, go no further than the fact that we're being run by the secret society that claims very clearly to be demonic, devilish. Crowley said he was the beast, by the way, right, of the Rosicrucian organization started by Francis Bacon, who actually was the brother of King James, who wrote the King James Bible. They invented the whole English, many of these languages like modern French and English and this new Hebrew thing, the block letter Hebrew. It's all invented out of thin air by the devil. Go read John Dee and Edward Kelly. He explains how the devil taught him these letters and taught him this particular prose and English and all this language, which is confusion. It's Yahweh again, confusing the languages. And so they wrote this Bible so that everybody in the world would speak this angel language, but it's a demon language. But anyway, they started these secret societies. So when they came over on their boats, we already had the Constitution, thank you very much. And we were the Pilgrims, thank you very much. And we were getting along with the natives. And by the way, we were the natives. Many of, the people that were here in America already were of the lost tribes of Israel. The natives. Yes, many blacks, browns, yellows, and whites, because the Celts were like natives themselves, nature worshippers, many deities running around with feathers in their hat, with Tootsie skirts. Yeah, we were all the same. All of us. Doesn't matter whether you're white, brown, black. So when we came over here, we were all different colors. We didn't know about racism, right? We were Hebrews. And the 12 tribes are of all different tribes. Remember, there were several mothers. Yeah, there was Leah and Rachel, but Leah had I think 2 or 3 handmaids. I think there were 4 other women that birthed all these tribes. Zebulun and Gad and Asher and Naphtali and all these different tribes. They're all different colors. And Joseph had a coat of many different colors. So there were lots of individuals, the Slavs and the Picts and so forth. I'm not quite sure, but I think some of them are pretty dark-skinned that lived over there in the Iberian Peninsula. And many of the islands, over the Caribbean and stuff, when they got here, were very close to black because they had been coming and, fleeing the persecution of the Catholic Church for years. The Catholics tried taking Spain, tried taking Africa, they tried taking everything in Persia. They invented the Muslims to try and take over those individuals. So when they came over here, they set up Washington, D.C. That was not a part of the original Pilgrim idea of the New Jerusalem. That was a part of the other mysteries, the upside down mysteries, right? The upside down cross and the upside down star with the Baphomet on it or whatever. And it's a mixture of lies and truths and hidden mysteries. In other words, they know what the mysteries mean. They're not the Lord. They're from the demons. They know that, right? So they came over here and did away with the Constitution. The 13th Amendment is to abolish slavery, but there's a loophole in the actual amendment. If you're convicted in a court of law, they can put you in prison. This started the entire prison system that we have today. And then every other amendment after that were written to make void the original Constitution. And in fact, it is void. It's scrapped. The Constitution we have now is written differently on different, it's block letters, and it's a corporate thing, and it's not the same Constitution. So the amendments that came after the 13th, all of them make void the original Constitution, which says they will make no law to infringe upon our freedom. So they made this Washington, D.C. with all the ley lines, and they were the Rosicrucians or the Freemasons. They were mercenaries. They were building these temples and so forth. They killed the prophet Joseph Smith. They persecuted Madame Blavatsky. They rose up Charles Taze Russell as their prophet, who brought over a lot of these Bavarians to make Hollywood and big businesses and Project Paperclip and the whole NAZI thing in World War III or II, I guess it was. World War II was all a big, hoax to just take over the world. And they did it. They won. They depleted all the money. We had the big, depression in the 1920s. Just like Germany had this Great Depression as well. They were about bankrupt and they were about to starve. So the people were like, bring us a king. And they elected Hitler. And they're going to do the same thing with Trump here. Because he sounds like he's trying to help us. Just like the Führer did. He was like, oh, we're going to break away from this chaos and rise up out of the chaos like the phoenix bird. Well, that's what they plan on doing. They destroy the people. They take their money. They famine, pestilence, and they get you down on your knees until you're begging for a dictator. Okay? So when they came to America, they knew that we knew about the truth. We had these truths. We didn't worship Yahweh. We worshiped the Lord Jesus. Yes, Celts were Christians, some of the first people to accept Christianity. What religion were they before Christianity got there? Well, they were the religion of Israel. Just like over in the East, Buzi, was the father of Ezekiel. Yeah, Ezekiel, the son of Buddha. And this Buzi was from the same town. Ezekiel lived in the same town. Look it up. That Buddha lived in. And it was at the same time in history that Ezekiel lived. So we've also shown how the Shinto religion was, they carry the Ark of the Covenant on two poles. They get the white robes. They call them samurai priests, which is Samaritan, from Samaria. So they scattered all the world and all these prophets. By the way, we were saying Dionysius is dia, divine. Isius means the Savior. Well, that is probably Elisha, but it's in a different language. It's not dia like Greek, but El Shia. Elisha is El Shia, or El is my Savior. Well, Dionysius means Zeus is my Savior, but Zeus and El is the same person. So Dionysius was probably Elisha, and he made the mysteries up there at the temple of Dionysius. So all these prophets that are all over the world, wherever they may be, it's all chronicled. That's why the Bible is so important. It is a history of all the world, of every nation. And in the Bible is the story of Buddha. In the Bible is the story of all the prophets. Dionysius, every one of them. And many of them fulfilled in types and shadows things that would be fulfilled by the Messiah, Jesus Christ. But remember, some of these prophets were very important people, like John the Baptist. Jesus said, there's never been born of woman a man greater than John. These were not, these were also divine beings. Jesus had looked at his disciples, said, ye are the Elohim, by the way. That means each and every one of his apostles were divine beings, as many of you are, as we all are, according to Jesus. So, man, I just rambled on. Now we're at 53 minutes, so I'll try to bring this to a conclusion. What I wanted to share with you is this. The Celts are scattered Israel that have these ancient mysteries that they taught. And the Druid religion is the good religion. That they're not the ones that worship Dan and Odin. Those were the Vikings, with the skull and bones, that were Bavarians that brought up the devil from the bottomless pit that goes all the way back to Dan. So we have to understand that there's no room for any kind of racism. Now, I'm not saying that people aren't going to wonder in their little minds. We've been taught racism from the time we're born. Like, well, wait a minute. Here in America, people who are black think, well, we've been persecuted so badly. Why? That's not fair. How come the white people got all this money? Listen, the people who got all this money, most of them usually have lighter skin, but that's because they're Bavarians. They're a particular tribe that just happens to be white, from Dan and Judah. Okay, and they're intermingled. You can't tell them apart. They were Vikings. Okay, that's just one particular. They could have been black, they could have been yellow, they could have been green, but they happen to have been white. But the peasants up in Europe were not treated well. They were murdered. They massacred the Picts. They massacred the Slavs. They for years they've been murdering white people. Okay, just like they've been murdering everyone else. Sometimes they try to mingle with white people to blend in, to go incognito and fool you as to who they really are or whatever. They'll change their name to maybe a French name or something, right? But that just happens to be the case. Now, I think it's providence that up in Europe, you've got two of these individual tribes that are prominent, Dan and Judah, who both happen to be kind of whitish. And Dan went up there and mingled and bred with them. But you gotta understand, it's not like a good thing, right? These people, they're the bad people. They got no soul. They're ruling over all of us, all the good white people and all the rest of the world, right? Because they're the bad people. Don't be jealous of the bad people. But it has nothing to do with race. It's just circumstance. Okay? When the Israelites were down there in Palestine in the days of Jesus, they weren't white. They were just brown or different colors. And so when they fled with the great persecution in 70 AD, some of them went to Africa. And there are Israelites that are black there. Some of them went to Spain that were probably pretty brown there. Many up into Europe were pretty dark colored. Some of the islands, people went to, America. The Native Americans were lost Israel. Nobody got, none of these tribes had it very good. They all were persecuted. They were all living by the skin of their teeth, trying to hang on to their culture, like the natives, like the Celts, like the African tribes. They've been denigrated. They've been told that they worship the devil and stuff like that. And no, we were the ones worshiping the true deity. We were seeing the spirits and talking to the Lord and being filled with the Spirit and having the festivals at the winter time, at the solstice, and dancing and singing and getting along and loving one another and preparing our children through ancient rites and ceremonies to prepare them for the afterlife, teaching them wisdom, teaching about their heavenly mother and how to commune with all nature and the animals and talk to the animals. Native Americans, many of them ate meat, but they taught their children that to say a prayer and to give thanks to the Great Spirit before they did that. They never took what they didn't need, and they always put back, and they worked in harmony with nature, and they understood the principles of reincarnation, as did the Celts, and as did the Africans, and as did the Chinese, and so forth. The bad people were the ones who worshiped the Torah, who believed in the God of vengeance and hate and colonization and war, right? Going in genocide. So there were bad people in every nation. You had Confucius that went over there and took over the Chinese, and they built this big wall, and they had wars amongst themselves. You had Europeans that were fighting. It spent hundreds of years fighting over how many angels would fit on the head of a pin. It was ridiculous. But anyway, I see we're coming up on an hour, so I think that's probably a good spot to just close here today, and hope you guys have a wonderful evening. I'm going to make me some dinner and pet my little puppies, and we'll see you tomorrow. May the Lord bless you. Have a good one.